Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and also for the invitation to join the meeting today. So thanks very much. It's great to be with you virtually. I wish it were in person, but here we are virtually, and very pleased to join. So thank you. What I'd like to do then is run through a few slides to talk about aquaculture's role in the fight against climate change. So just to confirm that my slide or screen is visible. I assume so. No reaction there. Okay, so here we go. Aquaculture's role in the fight against climate change. This opening shot is a shot of some aquaculture work in India, where we have a very strong partnership in the state of Odisha on the eastern coast of India, and women's groups that have been actively involved in aquaculture development in that state. A bit of an overview to start with. So, as we all know, the greenhouse gas emissions from human activities over changing our planet, but obviously having a particular impact on oceans and inland waters, the ecosystems that concern and direct the work of WorldFish and the CGIAR research program on fish aquatic systems. And those changes impact the ecosystems, they impact communities, and they impact the food system that we all depend on. And this diagram or illustration gives you some of the connections. I think one point to emphasize from this is the strong degree of connectivity across the changes, the overall aquatic biodiversity in our oceans and in our waters, and the various dimensions that contribute to food, livelihoods, social and cultural systems. So a lot of interconnectivity, and that poses the challenges in terms of responding and adapting to climate change. What I'd like to do here, or this slide, introduces some recent work published in Nature, where a global set of partners have looked at some of the risks associated with climate change under different scenarios to food system outcomes. So nutrition and health, economic development, social and cultural outcomes, and environmental. And we can see from this slide, this figure, the darker the country, then the greater risks faced for those countries in terms of the outcomes. And you can see, I think, very clearly that the countries with the highest risk are in the tropical and subtropical regions of the world: Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So different degrees, but a very strong vulnerability and risk to the food systems in these countries because of the impacts of climate change on those food systems. On the other hand, we know that fish and aquatic food systems can be and should be part of the solution to climate change. Why? 3 key points to emphasize. Firstly, fish and many aquatic foods provide nutritious and healthy food, nutrient-dense, nutrient-rich food, and many of the products can be produced with low carbon impact. So fish and aquatic foods contribute to low carbon and nutritious diets and can contribute more. Fish and aquatic food systems can also contribute to adaptation and resilience of communities, of countries. As agriculture in some regions becomes more challenging due to, for example, saline intrusion, aquaculture and fisheries provides new opportunities for adaptation. And thirdly, mitigation. As we look to ways and pathways for mitigation of climate change, we can look to aquaculture and fisheries for many opportunities for low carbon, indeed nature positive production that maintains biodiversity, maintains or enhances the natural ecosystems on which we all depend. Briefly on adaptation and resilience, and before diving into this slide, let me talk a little bit about COVID-19. And we can see in some of the countries that WorldFish and the CGIAR works, we can see that during COVID-19, many natural fisheries, backyard ponds, small-scale aquaculture systems have provided that resilience as markets have been constrained, value chains become more difficult. Those fisheries and aquaculture systems have provided food, income, nutrition, when other sources have become much more challenging. So we see through the COVID-19 that aquaculture, fisheries, and aquatic food systems have become an important pathway for adaptation and greater resilience of communities and the overall food system. When we dig deeper into the dimensions of adaptation and what that really means, through our research, we've identified with partners in Australia, James Cook University in particular, 5 dimensions that are important for enhancing adaptation. Obviously, the assets people have, the flexibility individuals and communities have to change as the circumstances change, a degree of social organization and strengthening of networks between households, between communities, the ability to learn and draw on new knowledge, technology to adapt, and the ability to influence agencies, the ability to influence policies, influence investments that are made in climate adaptation. If we take those different dimensions, we can put them into practice and support communities, support countries, to governments to put these into practice in various ways and enhance adaptation and the resilience of people. There are many examples of aquaculture contributing to adaptation and resilience. I'll highlight some work in the deltaic regions, both in Asia and Africa. And these are some of the highly stressed environments in relation to climate change, facing saline intrusion through rising sea levels, facing changes in downstream fresh water as a result of upstream changes. We work particularly in Bangladesh, we work particularly in Egypt, and we can see that aquaculture in those ecosystems, as well as fisheries, has provided quite diverse opportunities to sustain livelihoods, indeed develop livelihoods, improve economic opportunities. Introduction, for example, of tilapia aquaculture in the top 2 in Bangladesh and in Egypt in saline waters has provided an alternative when rice systems have become much more challenging to grow. The bottom left shows some very simple interventions into rice fields in Bangladesh that actually allow some of the migratory and small fish species in rice fields a habitat where they can shelter during some of the extremes of water movement and climate. And surprisingly, has such small innovations can make a difference to nutrition and livelihoods in small rice-based households. And in the bottom right, we have a classic, this is a CGIAR system where we're not just talking about aquaculture and fisheries, we're looking at opportunities where that diversity of farming system, those integrated systems can be secured and developed, and very well developed in some parts of Bangladesh. And that sort of diversity on the farm helps increase the resilience of the farming system and the households that depend on that. So aquaculture, definitely part of the solution in many of these deltaic regions, but we need to think of it in terms of the overall farming systems and the integrated approach. It's pretty a complex diagram, but we've done a fairly detailed analysis of the types of species and aquaculture systems that influence environmental, social, and economic performance. And we've got a number of top areas that we think from this analysis are important investments into aquaculture that improves its overall resilience and the impact of the aquaculture on those various food systems outcomes I talked about earlier. Genetics, tremendous opportunity for improving growth, but not just growth of species, but improving resilience. Feeds are a huge part of the carbon footprint. Much can be done in terms of better feeding efficiencies. We know the species choice has a big influence as well. So whether to choose a tilapia or a shrimp or a grouper, these all have influences on the footprint of the farming system and the carbon implications, as well as the other outcomes I mentioned. Disease reduction, post-harvest is also an area where there's quite a bit of waste and a tremendous opportunity to recycle and use waste more efficiently. Finance and trade, various tools can be used to promote, support more carbon-friendly and efficient aquaculture systems. Good planning and good farm management all play a role. So these various dimensions can be brought together for a very resilient aquaculture system. We looked at actually taking research and putting it into practice. I have a very strong philosophy with the teams I work with that research is important, but we must put research into practice, must work with different stakeholders and partners to put research into practice, understand needs, that ensure that we're working to put that knowledge, innovation into practice. And we work very closely with a number of partners in Egypt and have shown that on real farms, a combination of these factors, breeding, management, have a tremendous impact on reduction of the footprint, particularly in somewhere like Egypt, where water use is very significant, but all across the major impact categories. There's so much we can do to improve existing systems for better climate outcomes. And there's some emerging tools. So we've worked with a number of colleagues to put tools to develop and put tools in place. And two examples here that I'd like to highlight at this time. Firstly, Fish Scores, which is a collaboration with the Stockholm Resilience Center. You can see the website there. I encourage you to have a look at that website. That provides the tool where you can enter the data about your farming system, look at the footprint, look at the opportunities for improvement. It's quite a useful tool for actually understanding current performance and how that performance could be improved in climate, as well as other water and natural resource dimensions. And getting information to farmers. So again, back to Bangladesh, a partnership with a range of colleagues to bring some of the expertise from the agriculture sector in climate information to the aquaculture and fisheries sector. So developing information services, using digital technology, using our knowledge of the weather and climate predictions to send very practical information to farmers across the country. And I'd just like to flag a fellow researcher, Rumana of WorldFish, who's been instrumental in putting this system both in research, but in practice with government and private partners in the country. So I hope there, that gives you a broad dimension. I'd like to finish, as I can see the time is coming, with a strong emphasis that we have in our research about the importance of gender in adaptation to climate change. And there are a number of assumptions about gender that we think are wrong. We think the future of investment in aquaculture, in small-scale fisheries, has to take much greater attention to gender and gender equality. So the need to be more precise and specific about how investments, how policies are addressing gender equality. The need to be more specific about the data, about gender equality, so breaking out data so that correct decisions to be made, and to better understand the role of gender and shift current thinking into the future. A summary slide here. Can aquaculture be part of the solution? Yes. In adaptation to climate change, in providing low carbon, more sustainable and nutritious products for food system, but species and management make a big difference. Knowledge and tools are emerging in various ways. I gave you two, but there are a diverse range of tools available, but in various ways to support decision-making at farm level, at policy government level. Research is needed, but we need to focus on making sure that that research investment translates to innovations and into action. Policies investments are needed for impact at scale, and a particular challenge is connecting that investment in aquaculture to the broader climate investments that are being planned or taking place. And actions beyond aquaculture are necessary. Small-scale fisheries, so important to sustain many of those benefits and give particular attention to the most vulnerable and gender equality as we move forward. So with that, I thank you for listening. Thanks again for the invitation. Really appreciate the opportunity to take part today. Thank you so much.